Welcome to The Verge Live. I'm Ross Miller.
I'm Nilay Patel.
He is Nilay Patel.
Hey.
Just moments ago, Apple held its annual iPhone event. A couple announcements here and there, a few things. We'll talk about it. Later in the show, we'll be joined by our San Francisco crew, David Pierce and Dieter Bone. If you have any questions, hashtag of the day is Verge Live. And let's get to it. You've been upstairs blogging away on this, writing away.
I have it right here.
That's it.
Well, you can't tell.
Well,
There's no fingerprint sensor.
I also have a brand new one, so look at the plastic on it and everything.
So it's the iPhone 5S. That's what you need to know. There's two phones. And I will say this was one of the fastest events I've seen Apple get through.
Well,
I mean, it's an hour. They announced two things, pretty much.
Well, it's an hour and a half, because it's an hour of news and then a half hour of not getting Elvis Costello, by the way, doing his best Heisenberg impression, off the stage. Just would not let him stop. And I love Elvis Costello. I wouldn't tell him no either.
Apple loves the music. I took like 100 pictures of the Foo Fighters a year ago.
Oh, that's right.
It was really fun. But just blasted through the stuff. And a lot of stuff they didn't talk about, right? No Mavericks, no Macs.
Which I was surprised about.
They got on stage and they're like, here's iOS 7. It's coming out in a couple weeks. September 18th.
Yep.
And then they're like, and we're going to replace the iPhone 5 with not one, but two new phones.
Yeah, so let's break down the top level of what's going on. There's the iPhone 5S, which, as most of the S's are, is just kind of improved. There's a new processor, there's a new improved camera, and there's that Touch ID fingerprint sensor.
I would actually say the 5S is a much bigger jump than the 4S from the 4.
Okay, why is that?
Because the 4S, it was a little bit faster and added Siri, had a nicer camera.
Right.
Right. And
Siri, it did add Siri.
But
fine.
Great. Whatever, it's
fine,
Siri. And they made a big deal out of it, but it was Siri. The 5S over the 5, I think the fingerprint thing that's like a top line feature for regular people. Like you don't have to type in a phone the code, you just like fingerprint it. Everyone will actually use that every day, unlike Siri, which the novelty faded. And this camera, I think, looks incredible. And then there's also all the motion stuff with iOS 7. So there's a dedicated motion coprocessor, which is, by the way, exactly what Motorola says about the Moto X.
That's their version of their, like, Moto has the OK Google Now voice activation. This is their separate processor that just tracks
Right. It's a DSP that tracks motion, right? But Motorola has one, and now Apple has one. It's clearly going to be a common theme in the industry these days.
Common branding, yeah.
But I think that all together, and then the A7 chip is 64-bit, iOS 7's been rewritten, all the new phones are going to come with free iWork and iPhoto and iMovie. That's like a big set of upgrades over the 5. Like just all in all together, if you buy a 5S, you are getting a substantially newer, better, different phone.
Fine. Well, counter argument. I know that, you know that, we're getting to the specs. Whoever picks up the phone, are they going to notice that much of a difference anytime soon?
Yeah, unlock it by using the
But that's
phone.
it.
So I'm just like, look, if you're a 5 owner, every S here is the same, right?
Right.
You've got to make the decision whether it's worth an off-contract bump. If you're a 4S owner, this is like a no-brainer. And if you are somebody who was like, man, the 4S from the 4 wasn't a big enough bump, I think there's substantially more at the 5S than the 5. That said, overall, the event, the 5C, it was just the 5C and the 5S.
Right. So let's look. So the 5S is the traditional announcement. We expect that every other year. The 5C is the new one. So usually they just knock the prices back on everything. This time they're just they're discontinuing the iPhone 5 altogether, and now they have the 5C, which is more or less the iPhone 5, but now with color.
Right. And that's cool. Yeah. The cases look cool. I mean, all this stuff. I mean, this is super funny. Tim Cook is running around saying we're going to double down on secrecy.
Right.
All of this stuff had leaked, and the 5C in particular, some of the shots they even showed of their own video looked like the leak photos.
Exactly, to a T.
Like from the manufacturing line, and they kind of acknowledged that the stuff had leaked out. I think the 5C is probably the story of this event. The 5S is very much the next flagship iPhone. I think it's if you're into flagship phones and you're into iOS, this is the phone to get. And if you're an Android person and you're looking at flagship phones and you don't mind the slightly smaller screen, I think there's a lot of compelling stuff with the 5S.
Actually, I loved, so let's talk a little about the case though, because that's the big thing. And I was actually surprised by someone they have this
the case of the 5C.
The case of the 5C, because they have like the Johnny Ive video where he always talks about how beautiful it is, and he uses these amazing woods.
Say the line. So the 5C here, and this was Johnny Ive's line. Right. Beautifully, unapologetically plastic.
Yes.
On the 5C.
That's exactly what I have to say.
Which is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean it's hard-coated polycarbonate. They're just calling it plastic. They're just gonna come out and say it's a very blunt word, and it's fine. I'm happy with it. I also, speaking of blunt, I'm loving that the colors are nothing poetic. It's blue, white, pink, green, and yellow.
Right. I mean, that's their move. I mean, they did that with the iMac 100 years ago.
Right.
I think that the 5C is clearly the story. Apple knows it's a story. If you go to apple.com right now, it's like the homepage of apple.com is the 5C, not the 5S. And I think that is Tim Cook is in love with China. I think there's another event tomorrow in China. I think that'll be wholly focused on the 5C. The phone is presumably coming to China Mobile, which has like 750 million subscribers, which is insane. So it's a big market for them. The phone is it's made of plastic. It's the 5, right? If you think about what they used to do, the 5 would get cheaper and the 5S would be the new high end.
Exactly.
Now they've taken the internals of the 5, which have gotten cheaper after a year of time, and they've put it in a cheaper case. My guess is that there's a cheaper screen. We still don't know. We have to go look at it.
Right. And hopefully that's what David and Nilay are doing right now.
That's what they're doing right now. So they've made the entire package of the 5 cheaper, and they so they can go and sell it in China and India, other developing countries throughout Europe, and on prepaid and low cost carriers here in the States like T-Mobile, full price non-contract phones are a thing. Right. So they can bring down the price of the 5 and sell them without a contract. To this huge market at a lower price. They're in a pretty good position.
And let's talk about that because we expected all the rumors saying maybe the 5C. I mean, obviously it's not the 5 cheap, but like that was the joke of it. It's being sold for $100 on contract. It's the same price as like the second tier iPhone. What is it off contract? Is it any different? Is it actually a reasonable price?
They didn't say a word about that. And I think we're digging. I think our people are going to figure it out. I just don't. I think for the audience I had today, which was primarily U.S. and European people, the contract price is what matters, right? And so $99 for the 5C, I think, will attract a lot of buyers. Interestingly, crazy, the 4S is still around.
Yeah, it's free on contract.
Which makes no sense to me.
Well, it doesn't. What else are you going to have in that free on contract tier? You're not going to do the iPhone 5 because it's the same thing as the 5C. Like, they just wanted to add colors. In fact, they just took away the color black. That's really all happened.
Right. Well, they added gold.
They added gold for the 5S.
Right. Ultimately, this was one of Apple's smaller, more subdued events. There were actually no surprises, unless you count cases for the iPhone 5C. And the cases are cool.
The cute little rubber cases.
They make it look like a calculator. And I think that is a story unto itself. I think whatever Apple's doing right now, this is like they've got to put out the phones. They want to be focused on the phones. They're focused on an entirely new market with the phones. And that's a big deal. I think you're gonna hear a lot about the 5C coming up. But there's a lot of other stuff that leaked and a lot of other stuff they have to update before the end of the year. Right? There's still any new iPads, MacBook Pros with Haswell processors need to happen. There could be a watch. I doubt there's going to be a TV. So we've been hearing about all this other stuff, but today's focus was super tight, super small. There are probably just 200 or 300 people there, which is like tiny for an Apple event.
To have the iPhone event in Cupertino at Apple headquarters, it seems rare. Usually I think it's Yerba Buena or it's like one of the bigger venues.
Right.
Like Town Hall is tiny.
Oh, I'm told the contract-free price of the 5C is $549, but that's on T-Mobile in the States.
Right.
So.
But you think they're gonna make it cheaper for China, India?
I don't know. That's still, it's not inexpensive. It's expensive for some of the phones it's competing at, but for a mid-range phone or a higher-end mid-range or a lower-end high-end phone, which is kind of where the 5 lands right now, it is pretty competitive. But that's the whole story. Make no mistake, the story of today is the off-contract price of the 5C, which Apple did not talk about. And the reason it's the story is because there is an entire other market. Like, Tim Cook is in love with China. If you listen to him on earnings calls, if you listen to him talk about Apple's opportunity, China is where he's focused.
It's one of the fastest growing mobile markets. If they're going to continue to make a lot of money in this case, they're going to want to push toward China.
Right.
But that said, $549 in the US, I don't think it's going to be compellingly smaller or cheaper for the other markets. I don't think we're going to see something that's insanely cheap for this. I think we're going to see what is still a premium phone for those markets.
Right. But I think Apple's okay with that. It's much better. It's better than $700, $900 for the 5S off contract.
Right.
Which is, carving $150 off the price of the phone while still delivering an iPhone 5. That's pretty good.
That's pretty good. I was surprised. So we just got our. If you want to go to the Verge real quick, keep watching though. 5C hands-on. David Pierce got that up really fast. Not much to say other than it's a lot thicker, or only a lot thicker and a lot more plastic.
It's a lot thicker?
I didn't realize how much thicker it was going to be. I don't have any images of this. That does look like if you're just comparing the SD card slot. I'm actually going to pull this out and look. This is compelling broadcast TV, I realize. I guess a little bit, yeah.
You call it an SD card slot?
Or, sorry, SIM card.
SIM. Look, they're going to sell 1 billion of these. Yeah. They're going to sell so many of these. in these markets where they're targeting it, and to it's the bigger screen iPhone for $99, right? And it's colorful. I mean, people are going to go bonkers over this. Like, people are going to be attracted to it in stores. They're going to buy it for kids. They're going to like throw it down the well.
Right.
Throw it down the well. What do I do with an iPhone?
Yeah, I'm going to check my micro SD slot right there.
I think the question, and what's weird is, if you get the higher storage on this one, it's $199, and the lowest storage 5S is also $199.
Oh yeah, that is something. So Ellis was here during like just kind of pre-production rehearsal time, and he had mentioned that like the capacity has not changed in years.
Right.
Like 16 is still the base level.
But who needs more? I mean, I think I don't need more. I have a 64 gig iPhone. I never think like I'm running out of space, and I think that's fair.
Right.
It never occurs to me that like I need more space on this phone. And I think now that people have all their mobile devices, I mean, they make a 128 gig iPad. I think, and that's a niche market. I think the vast majority of people, the camera sensor is the same size. It's taking the same size photos. Right. The 5S does do a lot more video stuff. I think we're going to see a lot more crazy slow motion video. We should actually just go through the camera features.
Let's dive in there, because the 5S camera, like that's the thing that Apple's always been the best at, is phone cameras.
Right.
And like it kills me because every time I try to switch to Android, the one thing that I can't let go is the camera. There's something always a little bit off about the color, a little bit off about the saturation, and this is what they're saying is a much better camera. The big features, the quote true tone dual LED flash. One is a cool and white flash. One is a warm and amber look. This 120 frames per second slow motion, and then this is the one that hopefully you can kind of help me understand. It's taking a number of snapshots with each photo and then just picking the best one, or assimilating the best one?
No, it's picking the best one. Lots of cameras do this now. The GS4 does this.
Right.
I mean, like, this is a thing that cameras do now, that camera software can do. Right. It takes a bunch of frames when you hit the button. It takes like 3 or 4.
It's burst mode.
And it just picks sort of like, I mean, it's little different than burst mode. It just captures 4 frames, right? Or 3 frames.
This for HDR, they're just saying they're taking 3 photos and they were combining the best elements.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Apple, they know, and, Alice and I were talking about this right before we got on air. I think people are attracted to cameras and phones. And I think this has a way better camera is actually something people will get a new iPhone for. Maybe not everybody, but the people who love the cameras in their iPhones, they're going to be attracted to a new camera in the iPhone. Right. Especially because it's most people's primary camera. So it's better low light performance, the software is better, it does all this crazy movie stuff. That's going to be a major driver for the people who are deep into iPhone photography. For regular people, I don't know. But there is an arms race in smartphone cameras right now. It's obvious if you're paying attention, right? Nokia is going crazy with the 41 megapixel Lumia 1020. Samsung is going crazy with the GS4 and all of its auto modes. HTC is doing something dumb with ultra pixels and reducing it to just a 4 megapixel sensor. But the whole point is getting these cameras to take better photos and actually replace a point and shoot and be a legitimate primary camera for most people. And Apple, this is a big step for Apple.
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, like, I think at this point, I think most people are just, if they have an iPhone, they don't have a point and shoot. I haven't seen a person with an iPhone 4 and up who has also had a point and shoot. That's good enough.
Right.
So what we're seeing is technically way more impressive, way better. Marginally, though, how are people going to perceive this versus the 5?
No, so I think good enough for most people is fine, but I think they still know. I think it's good enough versus I don't want to carry another thing. But I think I wish this was better is still something that appeals to people, right? They're still going to concerts and trying to take photos in the dark. We still take a lot of photos in like poorly lit situations. And if this camera can do a better job of that, and actually in the dark, it has a dual LED flash, and the LEDs are slightly different color balances. So there's a cool kind of blue LED and then a warm amber LED.
This is
and they can fire them both and create and match the tonal balance of the room.
Right. Let me ask you, do you ever use flash on your phone or any camera?
No.
No.
Because it sucks.
It does.
And so, like, if they made one that doesn't suck, that's a legitimate upgrade.
It is, but like, I
Phone's
can't.
mad at me. It just buzzed.
I'll show you flash.
Yeah, and I mean, like, why don't you use a flash on your phone? Because it's a white LED that's like blinding.
Right. Well, same thing with the point and shoot, it's all bad. Like I've not seen a good flash on a camera outside of like maybe a DSLR attachment, like ever.
Right. Well, it's fine. I mean, like, if they can make the flash better and useful, then they will have achieved a good thing for people. This is why Nokia runs around touting xenon flashes in the camera, which is the nerdiest thing you can talk about on a camera phone, right? It has a xenon flash, but it's useful to people. It makes sense for people. So for Apple to say, we've color balanced the flash, or we can color balance the flash using, they're calling it the True Tone flash, I think, using 2 different color LEDs, they're in a good place where they can start doing the demos that like companies like Nokia have done and make a compelling argument that you don't need to go somewhere else to get the great camera on your phone because we built the best one all around, and we have the most features. And camera features, they truly is an arms race right now.
Yeah.
And so Apple made a big deal at the event about how they only add features that are useful, how they're not just like willy-nilly. They went pretty hard at Samsung with that stuff.
That was what Tim Cook's line is. We don't just pack in feature after feature. We think deeply about experiences we want to create. That was Tim Cook's way of closing the show.
And the experience they want to create with this camera is matching the experience of using all of Samsung shit. Like, I mean, that's it. You know, like a burst mode, a 10 frames per second burst mode. Very few people are going to use that. 120 frames per second slow motion. Right. I think more people use that. It's fun. It's cool. The novelty will probably wear off, but I think people will like it. This like crazy take a bunch of pictures. It'll pick the best shot. Like all that stuff is stuff Samsung's been doing, right? And Apple needs to be competitive on the camera front. I think the iPhone 5's camera is better than the GS4's already. Right. So if they can catch up in terms of features and performance, and then layer in this bigger sensor that'll collect more light, layer in a faster lens, they're rapidly improving what they're doing. And so I mean, like talking about only the phone of the new iPhone or only the camera of the new iPhone, it feels silly because that's what they improve every time.
Right.
But I think this is actually the standout feature. I think stuff like the fingerprint sensor is cute. I think it's a great I'm going to use it every day. I think everyone will use it every day. Right. But in terms of what you're really getting out of it, like I wasn't unhappy about typing in my passcode. I wasn't unhappy about typing in my password when I bought stuff from the App Store. But I am always unhappy with some of the photos I take.
I don't know. I'm excited actually about that, the Touch ID, in theory more, just because I think it's a stepping stone for what Apple wants to do. I think Passbook was the first example of like we want to start being part of the transaction process, the kind of the physical world stuff. And then the fact that they're saying this is Touch ID, it's not just for unlocking your phone, it's also for if you want to do some apps, some app APIs can let you authenticate iTunes purchases. I'm sure Facebook is coming, Twitter's coming. This is your authenticator.
They're replacing the password and the passcode with your fingerprint.
Fine, that's
right.
Great.
And the technology
much easier to remember.
The technology is cool. Frankly, I think the technology is cool, right? So it can read your fingerprint in any orientation. There's like a capacitive ring around the button that like actually turns it on. You can assign multiple people. So I could give you my phone and put your fingerprint on it, and then you could unlock my phone without having to know my passcode, which I think is actually really great.
And I can't wait to troll you with that.
I'm not going to let you do that. I'm just saying.
It's fine,
I would like your fingerprints though, for no reason. Look. That stuff is great. It's cool. I think it's one of those things that sells a phone. I just don't think it's the problem that needed solving. I think it's Apple, right? So they didn't. Maybe it's a problem that I didn't think needed solving that actually did need solving, and Apple's going to solve it this way. I've seen a lot of companies try to do fingerprint unlocks on a lot of different devices, and it's not like a resonant. It's just a cool thing you can put on a phone.
I mean,
and that's cool. Well, but like for Apple to be like, we solve only the problems that need to be solved. We don't do crazy things. It's like, are you sure? Because it's really gimmicky. It's cool, and it's probably going to be useful. I'm probably going to use it a lot because it's so simple to use. But to say it's anything other than like. I mean, this is one of those things where if Samsung did it, I'd be like, it's super gimmicky.
I agree and I disagree. I think if they can get other app developers to do it, it's more than just unlocking the phone. Which, by the way, I think that's good enough. Like just to have security and not
authenticating. So when you buy something from the App Store or iTunes, you like push great.
But it's one of those things. Like I think in Apple's way, I think for Passbook when that came out, we're like, oh, Apple's going to start doing the digital wallet, which just kind of went away. But now the idea that this can be a control, we can always make sure it's you holding the phone at any point of time, I think that opens up a lot that we'll see later. But I think right now it's just unlocking the phone and making sure when you do lose your phone, no one else can just figure out the password.
But mine's set to erase itself after 10. I'm saying, look, it's cool. I'm flat out telling you it's cool.
Okay.
I think it's a cool feature they added to 5S.
I still want to argue with you for no reason.
I just don't believe that the world was clamoring for this. No. I think it'll sell phones because I think it'll demo really well in stores. I think regular human beings will use it.
Yeah.
I think those are very important.
What was that thing? I think maybe it was Sony. I think one time we were talking to them, they're like, we sometimes build features that are great in the store and then no one else will ever use them again. And maybe this is one of those things. This gets people really excited.
I don't know about that. I mean, but Sony's version of that stuff is we built an LCD screen that has an extra feature that only the trained scientists can see, but it's probably motion processing. It's like that doesn't mean anything to me.
Right.
So Samsung lets you wave your hand over the screen to like move, which nobody's going to use, right? I get what Apple's saying, right? They're focused on core features, right? Here are things that we improve about this phone, and they just laid out 3 for the iPhone 5S.
Right.
A new processor with the new Core Motion API and the Motion Engine, 64-bit, it's faster. Plays new games, plays Infinity Blade 3, which look beautiful.
Right.
The fingerprint sensor and the new camera. And those are the 3 things they upgraded from the 5 to the 5S.
Right. The 3, like always.
And obviously iOS 7, but that's,
of course.
the 5 is getting that
We'll
as
get to that. Infinity Blade 3, by the way, which I love, it's coming out with the 5S later this month, which is kind of a change. Infinity Blade is actually like, it's always been announced in an Apple event. I was looking this up when it happened. Infinity Blade 2 was announced at the iPhone 4S event. It was released in December. Infinity Blade 1 was announced at the iPhone 4 WWDC event, released in December later that year. Change in pace, and I appreciate that. There was an Infinity Blade strategy game that never came out. Well, but this is their...
It's their Halo.
It's their Halo game of sorts.
So interesting about that. We thought a lot about what they would announce today, so we can be prepared with our coverage and have our reporters do all the research. And iOS 7 gaming was something that we were really focused on because there is controller support in iOS 7. Obviously, the phones are getting faster. There's a console launch about to happen for Microsoft and Sony. Like, this is an opportunity for Apple. We heard a bunch of stuff about the Apple TV. This is an opportunity for Apple to really make a statement about gaming. And they kind of were like, here's Infinity Blade. It runs really awesome on this new phone because the new phones are really fast.
Well, I mean, but the counter argument is like, if we're talking Apple traditions, they do the iPhone event, and then a month or 2 later, we'll see another event. Maybe for the iPad, maybe for Apple TV.
Yeah, but dude, I mean, maybe. They updated iOS 7 for the new iPads too. I mean, they could say like, check out Infinity Blade on the new iPad. By the way, we introduced controller support. Our partner Logitech is here. Like, check out this controller.
They could have said a lot, but like they fill up an hour, which is what they do. They do as much as they
fill up
can.
this hour really fast. I mean, they whip through this stuff in a way that traditionally Apple doesn't do. Right? I mean, this was a very and this is actually one of the first times I haven't been at an Apple event. So being able to just experience it from a distance is very different from me. Usually it's like a very tense, and I don't know the speed that it goes at because usually I'm like there and everything is happening at a strange emotional combination of like too fast and I'm too slow. Like the event, and then like time slows down.
Yeah, no, like
it's like I have a twin who's going at light speed, and then we get done, and the twin doesn't know about the iPhone, but he's 40 years older than I am.
I'm pretty sure like for the last.
But I've aged emotionally.
We've aged a lot in the last year. I think for the last 5 or 6 years, every Apple Live event has been either me plus Josh or you plus Josh, and like not being there is really upsetting. Like to an extent, like seeing it like remotely, and I'm getting used to it. I just don't know like. But at any rate, so we should talk about this. So we want to talk about the A7 processor. Like, what's the big deal here with that?
The A7 processor.
Yeah, the A7.
Sorry, the amount of tweets are streaming at me. Look, I know that I confused you. Do I love Apple? Do I hate Apple? Am I going to buy this phone, or am I going to buy it and throw it out the window and then put my middle finger in the air and scream at all of you? I don't know, and I don't think you do either. Look, the processor is great. Look, they're doing the thing, right? These phones have become computers, and they're going through the same stages of evolution that computers went through, right? We saw computers go from 32 to 64-bit. We saw the increase in like addressable memory. We saw the increase in performance. We saw that these things are computers, and it's really weird is Apple usually doesn't spend a lot of time on feeds and speeds. Right? They don't usually sit around talking about the processor at length. They don't talk about the actual technology of the phones. They talk about experience. Apple opened the 5S presentation by talking about the processor.
Which is very weird.
At length. Yeah. Like, it's serious length. It's 64-bit. Here's the nanometers. You're like, we made it ourselves. There's a motion coprocessor. Then they had to explain the benefits of these things. So Apple knows it's in this race. And I think what was actually the most telling is they spent so little time on iOS 7. Right, because if you really want to think about what their major differentiator with these phones is, it's their software. It's iOS. It's not the chips. It's not the camera, right? Everybody's they're in the race to improve that stuff. And all these companies are leapfrogging themselves every year with faster chips, better cameras, bigger screens, smaller screens, like whatever, right? Everybody's playing the hardware game. And Samsung and HTC and Motorola, they're all good at the hardware game, right? And Apple might be a little bit better this week. Samsung might be a little bit better next week. Actually, I think Apple's better all the time, but you understand what I'm saying.
Now everyone on Twitter knows where your side on this.
No, I just think, look, I think the GS4 is ugly. Sorry, dude.
It feels just terrible, too.
It does, but the HTC one's beautiful, right? I mean, I think you can make an argument that the hardware game is like commoditized a little bit. Apple's doing stuff to differentiate its hardware, particularly in chips, and that's why they're spending so much time talking about speeds and feeds when they release a new chip. Whereas when they talked about iOS 7, they literally blazed through it. They didn't even do their traditional, here's 10 new features of iOS 7.
Right.
There's Craig Federighi being like, look, it's swipey, it's white.
And let's talk about that, because the other thing that they did was different than the last time. When they unveiled iOS 7, it was like, this is what it looks like. When they did it today, it was like, this is what you can do with it. Like, they just went ahead and just kind of ignored the design thing altogether, saying, we already announced the design, it's out there, the reactions are what they are. Here's what you can do with it, just ignore the, like, how it looks.
Right.
There's not much to like. So, by the way, it's coming out September 18th.
Yeah.
All the devices you expect: iPhone 4 Plus, iPad 2 Plus, iPad Mini, iPod Touch 5th generation. Everything else is staying on 6. So,
that makes sense. That's how they do it. It's funny. We've had a lot of people talk to us about iOS 7 now. It's been out there in the world. Developers are using it.
Right.
And the overwhelming sentiment that I've been hearing is, you just got to get used to it, and then it's great. And I think that is kind of a weird territory for Apple, because I think a lot of people, I think nerds are tired of iOS 6 and they're tired of textures. They see what's happening with Android, they see what's happening with Windows Phone. Those platforms might not be as good in some places. They might lag way behind in the case of Windows Phone, but the design is interesting and fresh, and iOS looks like iOS. So there's all this pressure to change the design, but I think you show iOS 7 to a regular. It's a new phrase.
A regular?
I'm trying to replace normal. You show it to a regular normal, and I think it's crazy town, right? And I think that works well for Apple. I think that's finally what's different about this iPhone, and you can say, well, look at it.
Right.
It looks crazier than ever, but I think it's also going to work against people. There's people in our office who are like, I'm not upgrading my iPad to iOS 7. I'm just sticking with iOS 6 for a while.
What they say that they're going to upgrade. Everyone's going to upgrade eventually.
Everyone's going to buy the new phone. We're all going to buy it in gold. We're going to put a weird case on it.
Hold on. We'll get complete stop on this.
Yeah.
Why the hell gold? Why do you care? What?
Space gray. So it's white. It comes in silver, gold, and space gray.
I thought it was slate. It's now space gray.
He said space gray. Scholler said space gray at one point, which is I'm buying a space gray one. My wife really wants the gold one. She wanted the gold one immediately. Like, it was announced, and she's like, I want the gold one.
I guess in the minority.
I think gold one's
do not
sell
care.
like crazy. I do. I think gold is hit. I think like that kind of champagne-y.
Which is great. I hope it sells like crazy. I can go buy a white one like launch day then. That's fine.
What's happening?
What?
Sorry, people are
mad at you, man.
They're very confused.
Do you want to answer a couple of these questions on Twitter? Let's do this.
Yes, I don't think the Lightning connector is USB 3. Look, I don't. Yeah.
What?
Hang on, something bad happened to my microphone.
Oh,
I'll say some words.
we're taking a temporary break right here while Nilay fixes his microphone.
That's what you're talking about?
This is what I'm talking about right now.
That's what you've chosen to talk
about. I have chosen to talk about that.
I'm back.
All right.
I've returned.
Welcome back. I've missed you for so long.
Look. Hold on.
All right, so let's take it to it a little bit and see what we can talk about.
So here's what I got. Do you think the motion control chip? So let's talk about the motion control.
The M7.
It's called the M7, which is hilarious.
Because M1
it monitors
through 6.
the accelerometer, the gyroscope, and the compass. They said very specifically it's there for health and fitness apps. So things like the Fitbit, the Nike Fuel Band, they're directly competing them with the phone. Right. So you've got a phone in your pocket, it'll monitor your runs. They're very excited about, or it'll work in tandem with these devices, ideally. So they're, by the way, Samsung they're doing stuff like this too. I mean, it's interesting that they're saying they're focused, but they're adding features that have been around. I think it's interesting. I think having a phone that's more aware of its context and location, they're doing a very Google Now thing where they're like, it knows about your commute, it'll tell you what you need to know. Like, where have I heard that before?
Yeah, no, it's smart. And of course, I think it's also like, if they argue that's a separate piece, they're going to argue the battery life saving. We have a separate piece of hardware that's low power and doing this stuff while it's in your pocket. Other things we can just go ahead and turn off, and hopefully it'll be a longer battery life because of that. That's usually the big argument here.
Right, and I think that's, if I look at how my Fitbit runs with my phone, and it definitely kills the phone battery. If you keep the compass on the phone, it destroys the battery.
It does.
So, look, if this helps generate new kinds of like fitness tracking apps, if it helps with GPS apps, like nav apps, that would be awesome.
Right.
Like, super into all of that. I think what's interesting about it is, again, they made it's a technology story. There was they weren't like, look at this new feature and then like check out these apps that are better because of it. They were just like, and it has a motion tracking core. here's a slide with bullet points about our motion tracking core. This will enable, here's a promise about what it's going to do. Now, it's Apple, so usually their promises, especially when they do new APIs for developers, come true. But in terms of narrative for this phone, I think it's unusual for them to focus so heavily on feeds and speeds and tech instead of experiences and software.
Right.
And that's what Apple does. And I think this is, again, arms race for Apple. They need their phone to be competitive with the flagship Android phones, which are completely in the arms race. Right. So for them to say, we're not focusing on this stuff, and then throw in all these like technology features and talk about it, it's an interesting divergence. I think iOS 7 is interesting. I think it's wild they didn't talk about it as much as I assumed they would. I assumed we'd get like an hour of iOS 7 and then 10 minutes of hardware announcements, right? Because
that's the big thing, and that's what they usually. I mean, traditionally, that's what they do. But like, we're seeing something where it's like, okay, well, we're not going to talk about the look. Like, I'm very surprised how little they actually talked about even the aesthetic and what little time they talked about iOS 7 at all.
Yeah. They spent, I don't see, it's funny, I don't even know, like the one major thing they needed to fix on iOS 7, the one thing that everybody identified, which is the arrow on the lock screen. Right. I don't know if it's gone. The one that looks like you're supposed to swipe up to unlock.
That is, I believe that is gone.
It's gone?
I think it's not like a straight line, so.
It's gone?
Yes. I think
thank God. Like, but it's funny, they blew through it so fast.
They've been making minor changes, I think, with each of these like little betas that come out. Nothing that like you would notice like drastically from the original. Like, yeah, little things like that. The arrow's now a line, and like the font is thicker, which is great.
On the screen. No, the thing is on the screen. No, look, it's so crazy. Like, it looks crazy. I think people are going to freak out about it. I think people are going to be into it. I will install it. I will probably get a 5S. But what I think is interesting is that we are now in the age where Apple feels compelled to compete, to talk more about hardware instead of like how it's going to work with their software.
What was that? There was a line. I don't know if I have it with me.
And the camera. There's obviously exceptions. The camera, entire camera discussion was about how the software could do crazy things. But that's like every company has. If you build a camera, you have to build a camera app.
What was that line they had? They were talking about 700 million iOS devices out by the end of September. I think they said something like, we are going to be the biggest mobile platform or something like that. Is that something I'm remembering? Or am I just like...
Oh, yeah, no, and their numbers are big. So 700 million by the end of 3 months, they will have 700 million iOS devices in the market. Right. When iOS 7 comes out, so many of them will upgrade to iOS 7 that they will have the largest market share of any operating system by version, which is slicing and dicing in strange ways because Android doesn't work that way. But
and they can't say they're bigger than Android anymore.
They really can't say that. And they can, but it is impressive. It is wildly impressive that Apple can just like put out a huge operating system upgrade across all the carriers in the world, across all these devices, and people just do it, and they do it in such numbers that it entices developers to then support that operating system. I mean, if you look at Google, Android is like a mess. Right, it's a hilarious mess, and Google can't even like figure out what version of the operating system it wants to be on. They just announced 4.3 at I/O in May, and 4.4 they announced just because they named it after a candy bar like last week. And that's like, what are you doing? Like, what version of Android should I be on? Like, how can anybody get it? Like, 10 people have Android 4.3
Right. Not to mention every flagship phone is 4.2 right now.
Right, and most people we're still working our way to Jelly Bean.
But can I say I appreciate the fact that you've not eaten the Kit Kat bar that's in the shape of an Android.
I don't know what to do with
it's an ethic policy, and I appreciate
it. I'm going to get a 5S.
it.
I'm going to take a picture of the Kit Kat with a 5S. It's going to be beautiful. We're going to put a heart around it. Do you know, John? I'm looking at John. Do you know if the 5S camera software can draw a heart around pictures? He doesn't think so.
Yeah, I don't think we get the 2 shots either.
No, look, I carry both platforms. I think they're good at different things. I just think it's fascinating that a new iPhone today, they did not. When they announced iOS 7 WWDC, right? That's not a mainstream consumer technology story, right? It's a developer audience. They talk about developer stuff.
Right, but
it's out in the press.
Apple knows that press are watching this, and they have to make it. They have to explain
to the press also.
When
they announced the new iPhone, straight up the new iPhone, that's like the biggest consumer technology story across the industry. Right. I saw people today tweeting that more people would know about the new iPhone today than paid attention to like the conflict in Syria, right? This is a big deal for Apple. And for them to focus on like hardware features instead, it's like so much to the exclusion of what they're doing with iOS 7, they really blasted through iOS 7. And I think that's just fascinating. I think it speaks to where they are in the industry.
Do you think at all it's any way reactionary to what to what iOS 7 was when it first announced. A lot of people did like give it flack for design. A lot of people came out and said this is maybe not the best design, or maybe like I don't feel comfortable with it. Do you think this is just?
Well, Josh reacted really strongly to iOS 7 when it came out, right?
A little bit.
The day it came out, and I think that opinion has been validated over and over again, right? By people who are very deeply invested in Apple, by people who care about Apple in a personal way. I think fanboys Josh had his instant opinion. They all got mad at him, and then they were like, oh wait. And you saw that opinion get validated over and over again. You saw Apple change the fonts, that line at the bottom they changed. iOS 7 came out as a beta, and now it's hitting its final form. And you can criticize a beta for what it is. It's obviously going to change. But Apple really responded to a lot of those things. And I think the question is, now that we're getting our hands on it, and it's a real, have they solved some of the outstanding issues that pretty much everybody identified right at the start? Right. And I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer to that question. And I think it's interesting that Apple didn't spend a lot of time selling iOS 7. I keep repeating it because the more I think about it, the more crazy it is to me. Right? I mean, the iPhone is a story about software. It's not a story about specs. And today we really heard a lot about specs.
Yeah. A couple of quick questions because Twitter's. I'm now enamored with Twitter, and this is bothering me. One, you can't have my mug. Two, thank you for it's a nice tie. Three, everyone's telling me to button or not button the suit. If you have an idea what I'm actually supposed to do,
you should be unbuttoned.
I thought so.
You button when you stand.
Half the people were telling me to button, half are telling me to unbutton. I just don't know.
By the way, this is just what it looks like. I can't. It doesn't fold.
It's got a zipper, which I love about this.
It has a hoodie. It's a business hoodie.
But the actual important question. Oh, also, WWDC is not a mainstream event yet. Like we watch it, but like my parents have no idea.
Oh, we should talk about iWorks. Somebody just mentioned that to me.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's iWorks.
So this is
now free for all new devices.
So I think this is this is probably the most aggressive thing Apple did. It's completely under the table, like they just snuck it in. They didn't update the apps. Nope. I actually think they have a huge opportunity to update the iWork apps and to update iPhoto and iMovie for
iWork, iLife, all that.
I just and we wrote a thing about it, and people freaked out about it. I just think if you look at how people are creating and sharing movies and photos right now, there's a huge market to do Instagram, Vine stuff, but better with like a familiar interface instead of like this like traditional power user photo interface, and whatever the hell iMovie is, which I just confuses the hell out of me and pretty much everybody else.
It's professional grade or prosumer grade or something. Just down. It's not. No,
Randy Ubilos at Apple, who's their like head of video, is like taking LSD and drawing new video editing interfaces, and everyone's like, we're switching to Premiere.
If I was on LSD, I would not be able to use iMovie. Just blanket statement.
Well, look, so regardless of the state of the apps now, they're giving them all away for free. So all the iWork apps, which as far as I can tell have not been updated, they showed a shot of Pages that had like leather, and iMovie and iPhoto, which have also not been updated. But they're going to be free for new iOS devices, which is, in the case of iMovie and iPhoto, it's like whatever. But in the case of iWork, is like bringing the hammer down on Microsoft. Just absolutely bringing those are going to be the productivity apps people use on the iPhone. You know what the most popular phone is? Like the iPhone. Right. So like to have the most popular kind of enterprise phone be running a software package that does word processing and spreadsheets natively is a huge just swing in Microsoft. And I know you can you can get Office on these platforms, but like for it to be free means people will use the free ones. And I think Apple knows this is its moment to just go after Microsoft as hard as it can.
Well, it's also going after Google, because like if you're not using Microsoft, like you're using Google Apps, and like Google Docs is free. Everyone can use it. It's just not native on your iPhone, or the way it is native is not that great.
Right.
So like to have Pages, like I can use Pages now on my iPhone. If I'm using an iPhone, that's the easiest way to do some kind of like online sharing of sorts, because like it's cloud saved, right?
Yeah, it's iCloud. Look, I'm just saying like this is they just threw it out there. They're like iOS 7, like 10 minutes, and we want to talk about something else, and it's iWork. And I was like, man, they're going to update iWork. Like, what is that going to look like for this new operating system? And they're like, wait a minute, we're just giving away for free, and then they moved right onto the phones. And that to me is they're saying to Microsoft, to the industry, we're gonna take advantage of this. Tim Cook, in addition to loving China, loves talking about how the iPhone's doing in enterprise. Loves it. Can't get enough of it. And for him to start making a real beachhead in enterprise, this fingerprint sensor could be great for business users. I don't know how they're going to react to it. But business users, corporate CIOs, they want their devices to be more secure. So a more secure iPhone with like built-in, that comes, that has a lower cost of ownership because you don't have to buy additional software for it, that's the sort of thing that, it's like Apple's like sly move to get in the enterprise. And then for normal people, why would you run around buying Office 365 I never can remember the name of the office, the consumer office.
Clippy? No, I'm literally just
why
something else entirely.
Why would you run around buying Office when you're already getting a word processor, you're already getting a spreadsheet, you're already getting a presentation software, as well as iMovie and iPhoto, which, whatever. Why would you run around buying that stuff for your mobile devices when it's coming in there on there for free? And that is, again, the beachhead into like real Office territory. Like students who buy an iPad, like they're probably just gonna use Pages.
Yeah.
I don't know why they would use Office.
No,
I think people are going to start tweeting me like crazy, but whatever.
Well, I mean, worst case scenario,
whatever,
just
Twitter.
It's okay.
Whatever, dude.
It's okay.
I like being over here. I like not being at the event.
Really?
Do we have our event people yet? What's the story with them?
We are minutes away from a hands-on video from them, and then I'm assuming after that we'll be able to talk to them. I don't know. I feel weird not being there, and like I'm getting used to it because I've been doing them.
Yeah.
I've been taking a break longer than you have, and like getting used to it. I don't know. There's something about being there. Like I would have loved nothing more than to see Elvis Costello perform. Just go out.
You can like go see Elvis Costello. That part of it to me is never the. That's like that part to me is always the weird corporate. Like, and now this rock star will do what we say because of money, which is fine. And they always tell some joke about how they're at Apple, and they're like, I hope maybe they can fix my iMac.
I've got a product announcement today. That was the joke today. Sorry.
No, the Foo Fighters made a similar joke. What's cool is like just energy in the room, right? I mean, Apple events are like no other events. And this one, even though it was smaller, seemed like they were having fun talking about this stuff.
Right, and I'm sure they are. I mean, like, this is something they're proud of. They don't just do 2 or 3 announcements a year and like throw a ton of devices. Yeah. Apple's always like, we have one flagship product a year.
Right.
We'll kind of announce
except for the 5C.
Well, the 5C, but it's replacing last year's product, and it's just taking the same tier.
The 5C, by the way, somebody's telling me it's going to be $700 off contract in China.
No.
But I don't know. I don't know if that's true. Somebody just threw that at me.
That can't be right. It cannot be that much more. I mean, okay, if it is, I'm sorry, and also I'm sorry.
Yeah,
China.
I mean, again, the story of the 5C is not its contract price. The story is its off-contract price around the world, because that's how they're going to move market share, especially in these countries where people buy phones off contract as a matter of course. And in the United States, I think for carriers like T-Mobile, I think the 5C is like the T-Mobile phone.
Yeah.
Like it's like perfectly matched to what T-Mobile's doing. Especially because it's cheaper. T-Mobile's doing the no subsidy thing.
But so is
the downside is that you have to have T-Mobile.
Yeah.
Which I have T-Mobile on this phone, and I can tell you that that is a downside. I mean, I pay for T-Mobile service, and sometimes it's great, and sometimes it's T-Mobile.
Even in New York?
Even in New York. It's LTE. It's LTE.
Okay.
Sometimes.
What about the 4? I mean, what about the 4S though? You can still get the 4S off contract.
The 4S is a totally perplexing.
Right.
To like just utterly perplexing product. Like, it's next month. I assume they'll have another event. They tend to have events in October. I assume that they'll update all the iPads, and then the 4S. Oh wait, actually they updated the last iPad with Lightning as well. So the 4S is this last strange holdout of the old connector. It's free. I'm sure it's pure profit for them at this point. I'm sure the margins of the 4S are out of control. But it's the old screen size. But I just don't. I don't know. There's got to be some reason they're shipping the 4S still instead of finding a way to just have the 5C and the 5S. Maybe they just need a free phone and that's the one they're going to have. But I don't see the value in the 4S.
Right. Well, I mean, and then of course next year the 5C will be probably the free phone. But so we actually we do have the iPhone 5C hands-on video ready from the event. So we haven't seen David Dieter yet, but now we can at least live through them vicariously. So let's watch that.
Hey guys, this is David with the Verge, and we're looking at the iPhone 5C. It was just announced today. This is Apple's new cheaper, it's not really cheap, but it's cheaper iPhone. It's going for $99 on contract. And basically what we've seen so far is that it's just like the iPhone 5 in every way, from the home button to a lot of the layout, except that it has this new plastic back that feels actually really nice. It definitely feels like plastic, but it has some really nice colors. It feels really good. It's pretty well made, especially for a plastic phone. But otherwise, it's just like the iPhone 5. It has the same camera. It's running iOS 7 and seems to do so pretty well. It's pretty smooth, but we've seen that on on older iPhones as well. So it's really all about the colors here. It's a little cheaper, obviously, but the colors you get yellow, and there's blue and green and red, and the colors look really fantastic. They're not just a paint job, they're actually much more than that. So as you can see, the screen still looks really nice, as it always has. This is really nothing exciting about the hardware, except for the fact that it comes in colors, and it's a little bit cheaper. It's $99 on contract. It has nice feeling buttons. It's just a really well-made phone in a way that a lot of plastic phones don't really seem like. It's nothing like the iPhone 5. It's not quite as nice, but for a slightly cheaper device and really nice colors, that's not such a terrible trade-off. So that's the iPhone 5C. It's coming September 20th. Hey guys, this is David with the Verge.
And later we will have David and Dieter live from San Francisco, we hope, if they can get through Apple security and out onto the campus where our video crew is. So that was the iPhone 5C in a nutshell. It's exactly what we've talked about, exactly what we think. So
I mean, it's a very colorful iPhone. I think they're going to sell like absolute gangbusters.
I kind of want one just for the color.
I actually do think that Apple's strategy of putting the old phone at $99, it doesn't create excitement about the cheaper phone.
Right.
Right. It's like, oh, finally I can get the iPhone 4S for $99. Like, I don't think any human being thinks that. I think check out this awesome new phone that's $99 is a big deal. And Apple's clearly, I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about the 5S and the spec war, but Apple is focused 100% on the 5C. Like, that's their marketing, that's the homepage of apple.com, that's what they're going to go out in the world with. I think the 5S is like, it's the sophisticated. A sapphire home button.
We got it in gold this time.
Yeah, it's gold. But this is the mass market consumer product. This is the one with the colors and the cases. And it's the one that matches the operating system.
Oh, that is...
They're going to go out there in a huge way and say, the new iPhone, which is, we believe the best phone, and a lot of people believe is the best phone, is $99. And they're going to they're going to sell them so fast, it's going to be out of control.
And I just realized, because it just reminded me, the passcode lock for the iPhone 5, so the iOS, is the same kind of circular pattern as this new rubber case they're having in the back, because they have the little slits. So and that's something that's interesting, because we saw for the iPhone 4 they had the bumper cases, and then for the iPhone 5 they didn't really have an official case. And now we've got two. We've got the rubber cases for the iPhone 5C, and then we've got a new Project Red case, at least, if nothing else, for the 5S. Like, they're getting back into the peripheral market with this.
I mean, it's funny because I tweeted during the event.
There's the cases.
The cases look awesome. I mean, I think they look amazing. I think they look incredibly thick.
Your Moto X-esque customization option right there.
Yeah, but this is, I mean, in a way, it's better. The thing about colors is, I always want every color. Like, I want to be able to snap it off like old Nokia phones. So this, this lets you do that in a way. I just think they're going to sell so many of these, and this two-tone color thing that they're doing, I think other case manufacturers are going to eat that up.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's funny because the story of the 5C is like, it's basically the same specs as the 5. They improved the camera, they improved the front camera. No, it's the same rear camera, improved front camera.
And then a slightly better battery life.
Slightly better battery life, because there's the bigger battery. The 5S, by the way, much better battery life because the newer processor is less power.
Oh, that's right. Ellis was talking about that too.
Yeah, so it's like it's 2 hours more of like LTE browse time on the 5S. And then with the 5C, they just did the thing that you do, like you just glue in a bigger battery, like better battery life.
I mean, just a little thicker too, so like they had a little extra space.
Well, I mean, I will say the iPhone 5 has like an absolutely atrocious battery life.
It does.
So it's great that they've done the two approaches you can take to improve battery life. You can upgrade the chipset, make it smaller, more efficient, or you can just staple a bigger battery onto it. And it's the 5C, it has the bigger battery.
I think iOS 7, when they announced it, like one of the big things was it's a more efficient processor as well, which I'm hoping for. Like the reason I have my iPhone 5.
Do you have a new case?
I don't have a new case. I just got it replaced because the battery was like literally lasting 2 hours.
I got mine replaced because the first ones were built like crap.
Well, that works. It was a launch model. So.
Yeah, the launch model 5 truly built like crap. Like all the paint felt like by the end it was just like a naked hunk of stainless steel, and none of the buttons worked. And they were like, I brought it in. They were like, oh yeah, and they gave me a new one. The new ones are built way better.
Oh yeah.
So hopefully Apple figures some of that stuff out. I mean,
But it doesn't even matter because the iPhone 5 is gone now. It's a discontinued product. And I wonder what that means when, like, a year from now, you have a broken iPhone 5. It's lasted a year and a half.
They still have, like, iPhone 3Gs in the Apple Store. Like, that stuff, Apple's really good at that stuff. I'm not worried about that. What interests me is, does the iPhone 5 ever make a comeback? Does the iPhone 5C just turn into, like, mutate into different models over time? This is the beginning of a really big split for Apple, right? Where they're no longer just making one phone every year. They're making multiple phones a year, and they're making multiple products, and they're segmenting their product line. And they did it with the iPod, right? They went from the iPod to the iPod Classic to the Nano to the, like, just down the line. They've done it with the iPad, and now they're finally, after years, doing it with the iPhone. And this thing where they're going to segment the market and start competing in different places without just kind of dropping the price of an existing phone, I think is going to allow them to target the phones to what those markets really want. Which for the longest time was just an iPhone. Right? And now that the phone market's a bit more mature, it's a bit more saturated, different segments of the market actually want different things like colors and fun. And when I drop it, it really doesn't break. And that's what the 5C is kind of going. And
yeah, and like the old argument was like, you want the best iPhone? Well, don't you want it $100 cheaper? Like that's what you can get. We just keep moving it back. Now, like the mid-tier is actually exciting, and you want to debate getting that versus the flagship at this point. Like,
right.
it's
Somebody's
now
asking
exciting.
me which phone would you get? 5C or 5S? I know my answer.
I want the 5C look, but I do want the better camera.
I mean, it's the 5S.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way. Like, the 5C is great. It's cool.
It's colorful.
I believe they're going to sell lots and lots and lots of them. But
I've been using the Moto X for weeks because it's bright yellow.
that's it?
Well, I like the notifications, but mostly yellow. Like the cameras, whatever. But like, I like having a color phone. Like, but now I guess I can just get the case. Like, just go back to that model.
I mean, you could always get a case. Who cares
Yeah,
about the
it's a
case? You can't get a camera with 2 flashes in different colors. Rave flash.
Which we're assuming Rave flash.
You can't touch it with your finger to unlock it. Like, I want the new stuff. Like, I'm a technology dork. Like, I want all the new toys Apple has to give me, not plastic.
Yeah, you're right. I'll probably get the 5S.
Beautifully.
If I get an iPhone, it would be the 5S.
Unapologetically plastic. Gold. Do you want to talk about gold?
Let's talk gold.
Man, can we go back to that video? I really liked
let's
it.
just
I
watch
really
the gold.
dislike the
Just
silver
fan
ring.
it around.
I want to see it in person because I'm assuming this is like a render of some kind.
This is not iPhone.
But that
Apple.
silver
There we
ring
go.
around the button is not. It's not making me fall in love.
I just
Keep spinning. Come on.
You can do it
There we go.
faster.
Stop it. Stop it right here. Enhance.
Zoom.
Can you enhance?
Pinch
Can you
to
do one of
zoom.
these? You can't.
Whoa.
I mean, this silver ring on the button, I think that's one of the biggest aesthetic changes in the iPhone since inception. I think it looks way different on the white one and the black one, but it's hard to tell here. But that is, Apple doesn't make these kinds of core changes to like what the face of an iPhone has looked like the face of an iPhone, apart from a screen size change.
And let's be clear,
however
Apple
long.
does not need to have that ring out there like it is to make the fingerprint scanner work. It's doing it on purpose so you know it's a different model.
Yeah,
So you know
of
it's doing
course.
something there.
Well, that's cool. I mean, like, that's fine. I have a theory that Apple actually, they missed an opportunity that they took great advantage of. Yeah, it's really shiny. With the iPod, right, they change the iPod every year just willy-nilly. They're like, now it's tall, now it's short, now it's fat, now it's thin. Like, and every year, you're like, man, I got to get a new iPod. Like, it was like I felt the crying need to buy a new piece of design from Apple every year because they just kept on changing it. That they don't change the iPhone every year is like, I think, has actually like, I know people are on 2-year contract cycles, so they change it every 2 years and they sync up. But it's telling that they're making this much of an aesthetic change to the entire iPhone experience.
Let's because
I wanna show it off.
I do want to talk a little bit about like just for a second all the rumors we heard that never came to light because they have been doing more with the iPhones. The rumor had it was there's bigger screens that may one day come down the line.
I think that's next year.
You
I think the
it's next
iPhone 6 will have a much bigger screen.
Really?
I think they have to. I look around on the subway. I look at people with S4s. I look at people with Notes. People with Notes, I think, are insane.
I liked the Note.
Whenever I show people the one, they're like, "Oh, I like that screen." Like it's a bigger screen.
Yeah.
People are attracted to bigger screens, for better or worse. And they made the screen bigger once. There's no reason they can't do it again. I just don't think they're going to do that until next year at the very. Obviously now next year at the very.
Right, because what we're hearing is we're hearing the rumor without a picture, and then later we'll hear the leak. And unfortunately, as secret as Apple wants to be, there's a cycle of this kind of rumor mill.
There's just a very simple like, if you're Apple, you would be stupid to not be trying every size screen all the time.
Right.
And figuring out where you can land, optimize your apps, or you can optimize your OS, what people actually want, what people carry, where the biggest part of your market is. You've got to be trying all this stuff. I bet they're trying every size of iPad under the sun too. I think they're very comfortable with the screen size they have now. I think developers have only had a year to get used to it. I think they're just going to keep going down this road until they come up with a new or better solution.
Right.
And bigger screens, they unless you go to AMOLED, they suck power, and AMOLED sucks.
You really don't like AMOLED.
It's the worst.
I see you just get so angry.
And actually, I laugh every time I see a Samsung ad that advertises an AMOLED screen because it's like, what are you? Cool. Check out our awesome crappy screen. All right, we have the 5S hands on.
Let's do that.
Hey guys, this is Verge, and we're looking at the iPhone 5S. We just spent time with the iPhone 5C, the newer, cheaper model, and it's amazing how premium this feels in comparison. So from a hardware perspective, not that much has changed over the iPhone 5. It's now in 3 colors. There's silver, gold, and space gray, whatever that means. And they're all really beautiful, actually. I like the gold a lot more than I thought I was going to. So the big changes are really about the software, but there are a couple of hardware differences. The home button is now a little more shallow, and it has the fingerprint reader that we've seen. It's obviously not tuned to my finger, but it'll let you unlock or even pay for things on the phone with just your fingerprint. There's also a new flash on the back, which supposedly makes the camera a lot better. It flashes cool and warm to make the white balance on your photos look a lot better. But again, the hardware is not really the story here, it's the software. The camera is supposedly better than ever, which is kind of amazing because the camera was already pretty good. And there's a brand new app with all kinds of things. This actually looks kind of like the ViscoCam app, but it works really well. The photos we've seen, and especially the photos we saw in the demo, look really great. Everything's really fast. Apple makes a big deal about how much faster the A7 and M7 processors are. And it doesn't feel like a huge leap forward, but it's definitely faster. So that is really all there is to say about the 5S. It's the newest phone. It's coming all over the world to more than 200 carriers. It's coming out September 20th. It's going to be $199. And honestly, it's roughly what we expected. The fingerprint sensor is really cool. A newer, better camera is a big deal. But for the most part, this is just the iPhone 5, the next generation.
Yep, thanks, David. We will have David Pierce and Dieter Bohn very soon. I think the next 10 minutes we'll have them live. We were talking about, though, this iPhone is like Apple's now making 2 products a year for this, at least. And, this is a Samsung model. Samsung does 10 products a year. Apple used to do 10 iPods a year. Like, these a ton of different models. We didn't see any iPods today, which kind of surprised, kind of not. I mean, the iPod Touch still makes sense.
Together.
Right.
We were actually expecting the iPod Classic to go away.
Is it still there? Is it still in the store?
I think they just leave the iPods. I was seeing on Twitter somebody earlier saying in S years they ignore the iPod.
Right.
So, great. I think people actually do like the iPod Touch. I see them around a lot.
And the thing is, like, they did such a big leap for the iPod Touch last year. They gave it the Retina display. They gave it a colors, much thinner frame. Like, there's not much you need to do to change that, except maybe a price drop.
Right. I mean, I think the point is to keep the margins of that product high because they sell fewer and fewer every year. But I still see a lot of like BlackBerry dudes with iPod Touches. It's because they have to have BlackBerry for work, but they don't want to use it, so they do everything else in the iPod Touch. Like, that's real. That's still a phenomenon that I think Apple's catering to. And I think that's a great entry into the iOS ecosystem for people. Right. And I think people buy it for their kids and stuff. The iPod Touch as a game device still really up there. I have no idea if it'll play Infinity Blade 3.
I guess we'll find out soon. But
yeah, I mean, that's the sort of thing. But I think there's another event coming, right? I mean, we saw lots and lots of iPads leak. We saw, there's a lot of stuff they have to do. We keep hearing about this watch. I just think that there's clearly another event coming out. I would anticipate within a month or so. Because last year they did 2 back to back. And I think we'll see that. And remember, last year's second event with the Mini was like, here's 500 new things. Wait, was that the Mini event or the phone event where they did 500 new things?
I think it was the Mini event, maybe.
Right, and they did here's the new iMac, and here's the thing, and they just went nuts. And I think that they're going to do that again.
Yeah, and really quickly, just the iPad rumors we've seen, because it's beyond just text rumors. It's like case leak things. We see the iPad big size, 9.7-inch one that actually looks like the iPad Mini. It's got the much flatter back.
Right.
And everyone's talking about how the iPad Mini this year might have the Retina display. I don't know. I feel that's a little bit of a stretch right now, but. I mean, what's your take on that?
It seems like they got to do it because the competition is there, but I would anticipate not.
Yeah, I just feel like that's like.
I think there's I mean, I guess the question is also what would you do besides a new processor if you don't have to update the display? And the displays are out there, but my guess is that Apple's they're just slow and steady wins the race, and they're not. But that's completely uninformed.
I mean, yeah, my concern, this is again completely uninformed, is that there's just not enough battery life that you're going to take a huge hit at this point. Even if you shrink the processor, find more room to put more battery in there, a Retina display is a huge tax.
Yeah, I mean, when they made the 10-inch Retina display, they had to make it thicker, right? And I'm a big iPad person because I prefer the Retina display over the Mini's display. But if they had a Mini with a Retina display, I would probably reconsider it.
Right.
But whatever. That's just one man. One man's opinion.
Right. So the things we were expecting, they could still happen in a month's time. We could still see new iPads soon. We may see some Apple TV stuff. We've been really more than I think anyone else we've been obsessed with is the iOS 7 game controller support. We've seen nothing except us looking at that line item going, what could happen?
We heard rumors about Apple TV apps. Nothing.
Right.
We heard rumors of a new Apple TV that were then debunked. I mean, they have a lot of products. I mean, a 13-inch MacBook Pro with a Retina display and a Haswell processor and useful graphics performance, that's something I want.
Yeah.
Didn't mention the word Mac OS 10 once today. It seems like Apple's price range, I mean, there's really just $200 separating kind of the old and new iPhones here.
Okay.
And so I'm curious. I mean, this iPhone 5C, if the goal was to be a lower priced iPhone, it's strange to me that it's $549.
It really is. I mean, like, 549 contract, like off contract rather, it's like, that's not compelling to me right now. Like, especially like when the Nexus 4, rest its soul, it's gone now, was tacking at the...
$199. But the Nexus 4 is a great, it was a cool phone when it came out.
Right.
Not great phone, no LTE.
No, but like...
and I actually think it was slow. I have always thought the Nexus 4 was kind of slow. But
it had brand value, and I think that was the important part. And like, it is a market that Apple has yet to even like bother to look at.
$279 unlocked.
Well, the off contract, like in US, which is not a big market. Maybe next year it'll be bigger, but like.
But Google and LG made so few of those phones; it didn't matter what they priced them at.
David, try again.
We can hear you, David.
David, you look great.
You're live right now.
Welcome to America, the East Coast. Yep, thumbs up. Hey, David.
Tell me about this event. What was your first Apple event like?
Weird. I've been here since like 7 this morning. I think I live here now. It was strange. I've done a million of these events, and yet the like tenor and the anticipation for an event like this is totally unlike anything I've done. It's bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I did my first one. Like, it was just such a like. It was so stressful. I think it was one of the first live blogs I ever did for you guys.
Yeah.
Like back in the Engadget days.
David? How many gray hairs do you have right now? Count.
How many what?
He's counting right now.
Don't worry about it. Dave, tell me about the vibe in the room when they were announcing the phones, because it seemed like they really raced through iOS 7 and got straight to the phones.
Yeah, I mean, it was a sort of an odd event. I mean, they kept saying over and over, just acknowledging the fact that this had been leaked to death, and that there was really nothing all that surprising. And they were like, you may have already seen this on the internet, and it was a bizarre sort of show. And I think a lot of people kept waiting for them to say, and here's one more thing, and here's why this is really incredibly interesting. And some of the changes that they made are nice, and I've played with both of the phones, and they're both really nice. I like the 5C a lot more than I thought I was going to, but it's still, I came away, waiting for the one more thing, and then it was like, oh, the one more thing is Elvis Costello playing for 25 minutes. And that was great, don't get me wrong. But it was just totally unlike what I thought this event was going to be. We had, we were ready for there to be 24 different things at this event, and it turned out to be 2, both of which we kind of already knew in their entirety. It was very strange.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is, even like in this new era, like we've seen a lot of leaks of Apple, like especially the last couple of years. This, even like by that standard, has been a lot leakier, I guess. I don't know, like.
They're doubled down in secrecy.
They've double down in secrecy apparently means more open than ever before.
Right. So, David, you played with both phones, and both of them were leaked to hell and back. Tell us about the 5C, because obviously I think that's in its way, that's the lead phone of today.
Yeah, so I think the 5C is interesting. I will say the colors look fantastic. I'm almost surprised that it took Apple this long to come up with colors. And they're really clean, they're really well made. It doesn't feel like a paint job. And even the way they've done the plastic feels a lot better than I thought. I complain incessantly about the Samsung Galaxy S4 and the LG G2 and all these slimy, plasticky phones. And the 5C is glossy and it loves fingerprints, but it doesn't feel that way at all. It's a much more sort of attractive, comfortable device. It feels a little like a toy almost, because it feels like something you would just like toss into the air and not worry about. But I like it more than I thought I did. I don't totally understand why it exists. Like it's not that much cheaper than the 5S. And when you hold them side by side, there's just no comparison. The 5S it's lighter and thinner and better, and it feels so much more high end. But the 5C it's a really nice device. I'm just not sure who is going to buy it unless they really want a blue phone. And like if they do, great. It's a really nice looking blue phone.
Is it rubbery? I have not been able to tell from the photos and videos. Is it kind of rubbery feeling? That's what it looks like.
It's not really. It doesn't have any of that sort of grippy texture that some rubbery phones might have. It feels it's I don't know. It's not slimy, but it's sort of the happy medium between the two, and it kind of works. It's really comfortable, but it's really smooth and glossy at the same time. It feels a little like holding a trackpad on a MacBook, in that it's not super metallic and perfect, and it's not like glass, but it feels smooth still. I don't know. I like it. But it's also thicker and heavier and fatter.
Right, but so it's basically an iPhone 5, right? I mean, that's what's going on internally. It's an iPhone 5 running iOS 7.
Right. No, they basically, it seems like, it almost looks like they just put a case on the iPhone 5 in like size-wise and everything. It's like if you have a blue plastic case around your iPhone 5, you already kind of have an iPhone 5C. And the specs are exactly the same. It's running iOS 7 and seems to do it really well. A bunch of us, the Verge have been using the beta, and it works well there too. So it's not really surprising that it works well. But like, it works fine. It's exactly as you'd expect, but it's very much just an iPhone 5. And then it was odd for them to say, the iPhone 5, and I guess they do this at all of their events, but they say, the iPhone 5 is nice, and here it is cheaper, and we're redesigning it. But they didn't really redesign it. It just has a new connector instead of the older, cheaper phones. It has Lightning across the board now. So I don't know.
Yeah, so let's talk about the 5S a little bit. It seems like the two main features that people will notice are the fingerprint sensor and the camera. Did you get a chance to use the fingerprint sensor?
We've used it a little. I haven't had a chance to actually train it to use, to work with my fingerprint. It takes a couple of minutes to get set up, and you have to personalize it to yourself and all that. But just watching them do it in demos and the people standing at the tables and stuff, it seems really fast. And my problem with it was always like, well, is it going to be that much faster to press and hold and wait and then have your phone open? I could just press 4 numbers and get my phone open that way. But it seems to be relatively instant in the sense that you just hit it, pause for like a half a second where you would be swiping to unlock, and it just pops open. And that's really cool. And like beyond all the rest of it, the camera is supposed to be better. We've had a chance to test it like a little bit, but the pictures they showed during the demo looked incredible. So unless they're lying, which everybody is all the time, but unless they're lying, it's a great camera. And but the fingerprint sensor, it's still a little hard to tell. But if they have this really limited idea for what they want it to do, which is interesting. I thought they were going to have these big ideas about passbook, and they were going to have all these discussions about what additional security means, and it was like, no, you just enter your passcode and buy things in the store. And like, that's cool, but I don't know if it's earth-shattering.
So, the big question, what we've been discussing, is whether or not the fingerprint sensor is like a gimmick or like the first step down a long road of like actual features for people. Because it seems to me like I would use it, but I would use it because I'm a big nerd and I want to use it, and other people would be like, I don't really care about that.
Yeah, I think it seems like part of the setup process is going to be training it to use your fingerprint. And if they can do that, like build it in, you sign into iCloud, you sign into your email address, and then, train your fingerprint. And if they can get people to do that to the point where, everything's perfectly secure, it's a really easy sales pitch, right? It's not any harder to open your phone, and everything's way more secure. Like, that seems like an easy win-win, and I think people get what fingerprint sensors are. So if they can make the setup as easy as it seems to be, I think it'll catch on in a big way. I don't know if it like changes everything about everything, but it's a really neat gimmick as opposed to what Android does or even iOS, where it's like you either have to draw a pattern or remember numbers. Like, those are all sort of broken, and I think a fingerprint is objectively better, even as long as they make it simple.
Right, and then so the camera, which is the other big consumer-facing feature, is it so much better than the 5 that it'll drive sales? That's the other thing we were arguing about.
Well, it's hard to tell. A lot of what they talked about was the iOS 7 software, which is obviously coming to all of these other devices as well. But they've already had the best camera on the market. And, now it has a faster lens and a bigger sensor. And it's funny, they're doing the same thing that like HTC is doing, where they're saying, you don't need more pixels, you need bigger pixels. And
so many microns.
They're going to sell this way better than HTC did, I'm sure. But I don't know. We've only had a few minutes to test it, but that's one of the big things I'm curious about. I know I was talking to Jordan, one of our video guys earlier, and he uses an Nexus 4 now, and he was like, yeah, I'm going to probably end up buying this. And I was like, why? He was like, because I need a better camera.
Yeah. Well, the Nexus 4 camera is particularly
all they have
shitty.
to do is make some improvement.
It's
awful. But I think as long as they make some meaningful improvement, it's going to be huge.
Let's talk about it real quick. You mentioned the iOS thing, and for us, having done the Apple things, it seemed like they just blasted through it faster than we've ever seen before. What was your take being there, like when they kind of like did the iOS unveil and just kind of moved past it?
It was odd. Like the whole event, they just sort of like Elvis Costello was on stage for more than anything else at the event, which kind of tells you everything you need to know. Like they had all these announcements, but seemed like they were rehashing things that we all already knew. And I don't know, it was a very strange event. I don't know, this is my first Apple event, so I don't know if they're all like this, but they went through the whole thing, and then we all kind of looked around and we're like, oh, it's over. They like said all these things, and then they're like, they're great, and then just breezed on past them because everybody already knew.
Yeah, I don't. I don't think regular people know about iOS 7. This is what I was saying. I think we know about it, and there's a huge community of people who love tech, who paid attention to WWDC and looked at iOS 7. But I think when there's a new iPhone, and particularly an iPhone like the 5C, which is going to be everywhere, they're going to market the hell out of it, for them to spend so little time talking about iOS 7, what it means for regular people, that's strange to me. And they didn't even show it on the iPad, right? I don't think Apple has officially shown iOS 7 on iPad yet. No. They didn't at WWDC, it wasn't ready yet, and they haven't today.
They showed it. We got a screenshot. We got a screenshot, and they said, you know, it looks great, it works great, you'll love it. And that was about all they said. But it's odd. It seems like they're almost trying to convince us now that iOS 7 isn't such a huge change, right? They're selling it almost like a new app, where they're like, look at these new features, and it can do these 3 new things. But whereas they presented it before as like a complete and total overhaul of everything, now they're just saying, you know, we've added a handful of features. And even, you know, Craig gets up and in his wrap-up, he was like, we have over 200 new features. And I was like, well, that's neat, but you also changed everything about how it looks and works. And like maybe that's just like the first feature is it's totally different now. But I don't know, it was odd. I get the sense that they're trying to convince the world that it's not nearly as different as we thought.
Is that working? Did that work? Well, so in the hands-on area, so that, you know, there's a lot of conversation that goes on after the event when people are playing with this stuff. Is the sense in the room kind of that people are used to iOS 7 now, or is it still kind of like, what the hell, why is it so swoopy?
There's definitely a lot of what the hell, why is it so swoopy? But and it plays nice with the colors, actually. It all feels very exciting, and you're like dancing around a cell phone. But I think, I mean, you have sort of a self-selecting crowd here, where most of these people, I bet, are already running iOS 7 on one device or another. But you have a very sort of segmented audience here, where it's a few people who are cool with it and want to play with it because it's a new thing. And I think the challenge they're going to have is just what you said, getting from, you know, there's a new iPhone, that's neat, to here's this entirely different way of interacting with your phone. And I don't know how that's going to go.
Cool. All right. Any other questions you got, David? Anything about, like, any reactions? Anything you want to say before we you know, get rid of it? Yeah. You're not saying my hand gesture, but it's not nice.
I'm just really mad that there's not a Retina iPad mini yet. Like, I came here for iPhones and iPad mini with Retina display, and I was just gonna like take the money out of my pocket and leave it on the campus, and they didn't do that. It was weird. Either there's gonna be a huge event in October, or Apple's not really up to all that much. Like, the new phones are nice and they'll do well, but we had all these grand plans for what they might do, and so little of it came true. It was odd.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I think this event was really focused on the phones. I think, you know, they've got to bring, you know, if you look at the curve of iPhone sales, they've been flattening, right? They've got to put a lot of muscle behind the 5C right now, because that's the phone that's going to increase their market share, because they can target some of these other phones around the world. But I think next month, if there is indeed an event next month, will be crazy. So, David, you got your first taste, you got your feet wet at a quiet event. You should get ready.
Yeah, book your flights now.
Because next month you're going to need a gun.
All over again.
Yeah, I'm ready. Oh, and I should say one more thing. The Infinity Blade demo was incredible. So they got up and demoed Infinity Blade 3 on the 5S with the new M7 and A7 chips, and it looked amazing. It looked like one big cutscene, which is just insane. It looked like a movie, but he was playing, and it looked incredible. So if they're, like, the games on this thing are going to be pretty amazing.
All right. I literally just saw a man taking out the trash behind you, and it looks like there's a body in the dumpster. So you should go check that out. Also, I think they're well and done. Thank you so much, David.
Thanks,
say hi to Dieter for us. Please.
All right, wish me luck.
There's a garbage guy.
Bye.
We are watching a Wes Anderson film right now.
There's some weird stuff happening
very
at Apple.
Flat, which is
so that's it. I mean,
that's pretty much it. I mean, there are two phones. We expected things like maybe Apple TV comments. We thought maybe new iPad stuff, new iPod stuff. Even a hint at the watch, because Samsung already just laid it out with their Galaxy Gear. None of that. It's very focused, very quick. They put a lot into an hour, and then gave Elvis Costello a half hour to do whatever he wanted.
That's cool, though.
I love that. I love,
you know,
Peace, Love, Understanding, Radio, the new song with the Roots.
Right.
I'm happy for that. I was very happy to not.
That will never be online because Apple doesn't have the rights to it. This is really the.
That is a shame.
Yeah, really disappointing.
Yeah.
But look, hey, 2 new phones. I think next month will be an incredible event for Apple. I think
if they do it. which I'm assuming
They
will.
have to
Yeah.
look. They have to put out new iPads before Christmas. There's just no way they're not going to do that.
Right.
They've got to refresh the Mac line. Haswell's out. There's stuff they should.
Have
do
we
there.
gotten the Mac Pro released it yet?
No, they haven't talked about the Mac Pro yet. Maybe they never will. Maybe that was all a fever dream. They did the phones. I think they were focused on the phones, like I'm saying. I think the 5C is a big deal for them. And I think they're going to try to use that as a wedge in all kinds of markets. I do think it's a little bit overpriced. I've been looking at Twitter, and a lot of other people share that opinion. Right. But I think that's where I think you're going to see Apple focus on that 5C in a way that they've never focused on their mid-range or low-end product before.
Right.
And the 5S is going to be what normal people buy because it's only like $100 more off contract.
Right.
Which is insane. But I think next month is sort of where Apple comes out swinging. And I think that if they're going to do a watch, that's where they got to do it. If they're going to do the Retina Mini, that's where they got to do it. So we'll see.
We'll see. Well, that's it for the Verge Live. Thanks for joining us. David Pierce says at Pierce David. Backlon was Dieter. He wasn't there, unfortunately. Reckless. No Roscoe, no E. Special thanks to all our video team. Jordan, Christian there. John, Lagomarsino, and team here. We'll be back with the Vergecast on Thursday. Detours, obviously, tomorrow. And thank you so much for joining us for more all Apple stuff. TheVerge.com.
We're here.
Right now.